Well, hey everyone. This is Hey Dean Yeager, starring me. Here recently, I had a bit of a brainchild, something I want to bring up. Maybe I wanted to try something different. We're doing a bit of an experiment here at various topics. Hey Dean Yeager. Hey everybody, it's Joe from Hey Dean Yeager, minus my cohorts today, Daniel and Jack. Here recently, you guys might have seen we released a teaser trailer in which I expressed my interest, my intention of pursuing, uh, not necessarily topics, but films, music, interests I have separate from my co-hosts. Um, we're going to continue to do, obviously, team videos and whatnot, discussing film, music, um, other topics, Bigfoot, and things of that nature. But this is just something, a bit of an experiment I wanted to try, and something that hopefully will get off the ground. Hopefully you guys like it, enjoy it, subscribe. I really hope that you guys find it engaging, um, interesting. I'm going to be taking a look, at least initially, and this was the driving force behind what I wanted to do with these videos. Initially, I'm going to be taking a look at some of the lesser known actors today that they're not, Tom Cruise or Harrison Ford, Matt Damon, Matthew McConaughey, guys of that nature, or women, Angelina Jolie, Julia Roberts, Meryl Streep, so on and so forth. They generally fly below the radar. They're labeled as character actors or actresses. Some, might be even considered less than that. They tend to get typecast. Um, but, these are things I find interesting. These are character actors. I've always been interested in the guys in the background, the people in the background. Who's that? Man, he did a great job. Had a great performance, and he was only in it for 5 minutes, right? Cameo, or maybe a supporting role. Maybe he's a bartender, or maybe she was a cab driver. It doesn't matter. It's just stuff you find compelling, add to the story, and sometimes they even eclipse in their performances the main character, the main protagonist. Of course, a lot of these actors and actresses are villains, and that's what makes them so compelling and fascinating. And we'll be talking about that too. But today, I wanted to tackle one that's always been one of my favorites since I was a kid. I was a pretty big kid. Even in grade school and junior high, I was pretty tall, and I guess I could identify with them better. Um, it's Dolph Lundgren, ladies and gentlemen, Dolph Lundgren. People might know him recently with a career resurgence in films like Aquaman and the Expendable series. Some of this we've touched on in previous videos. Um, but, again, in the nature of these videos, I sort of wanted to take a deep dive into his career and review some of the stuff that people may have either missed, or maybe it's the back of their mind and they're going, oh, I remember that and whatnot. But I'm going to go ahead and start it off as usual. I do have a poor memory, so I'm going to be referencing my notes. I'm the Iceman, after all. So I'm going to get started with his earliest work. It was in '85. It was a James Bond Roger Moore vehicle. It was one of the entries in the 007 series. It was A View to a Kill. And I'm not a big, as my friend, not as much as my co-host, my friend Jack is, I'm not a huge fan of 007. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it or anything. I just never got into it that much. I saw this by virtue alone of being a Christopher Walken fan, and then obviously Dolph Lundgren here, who makes his I believe his first American appearance, if not his, actually could be his first film debut, period, was 1985, View to a Kill. And someone could correct me, Jack, maybe you can, if it was Roger Moore's last uh, effort as James Bond in that series, and then taken over by Timothy Dalton, but that's neither here nor there because we're talking about Dolph Lundgren. So Dolph shows up here as basically one of Walken's right-hand men, henchmen. He had Grace Jones and he had Dolph Lundgren. And, I can't, it's been a long time since I've seen this, very long time. So I couldn't tell you how exactly he gets off in it, how Roger Moore gets rid of him. If he does it all, I seem to remember him just sort of disappearing throughout the film and not coming back. Um, well, maybe that would actually lend to the credibility of this James Bond entry. Maybe he needed to do that. But yeah, that was his that was his debut performance in film. Um, and then after that, he went to what most people remember him as Ivan Drago in Rocky IV. This was a big deal. It was a big deal back then, still a big deal right now. I'm not going to go into it simply because there's so much going on right now in Europe, around the world, regarding the former USSR and whatnot. Needless to say, in the film, he's an antagonist, and he works. He's the main champion of the USSR, and he's pitted against Rocky Balboa, who's our champion here overseas in the U.S. Initially, it's Apollo Creed, but it's the iconic moment where he hits Creed so hard he kills him. Uh, I don't. What was it, Jack Doe? It was some kind of. I think I remember in the film it was something about 1,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. Basically, no human being can do this. But again, we're talking about Dolph Lundgren. So he shot to superstardom with this film. He really broke the barriers because originally he's from Sweden. He had even in this and previous this and getting into the next film I'm going to talk about here in a second, he had a hard time speaking English. So he was up against a couple different things, and the fact that he was able to get this role as the main antagonist opposite Stallone in Rocky IV and kill off, by his own hands, kill off his best friend, Apollo Creed, Stallone's best friend, Rocky's best friend, and solidify himself in the world of villaindom, just really says something, I think. Being a newcomer to this country and to the film industry in general. So, moving on from that, I'm going to go to one of my favorites. It was Masters of the Universe, 1987. I was a big, big, big fan of He-Man when I was a kid. Had all the action figures. A lot of you fans out there might know, may have collected yourself. I'm sure you probably have the stories. Got the Castle Grayskull and Snake Mountain, Battle Cat, He-Man, all the whole assortment. So I was huge. I pretended to be He-Man when I was a kid and so on and so forth. So when I heard this was coming out, I was 6 or 7 years old. I was ecstatic. I was jumping for joy. I thought it was going to be great. Well, I know a lot more now than I did back then, obviously, about film. And the fact that Canon Film Group, Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus, put this together and produced it should tell you something off the bat. Again, back then I didn't know of any of this stuff. I just wanted to see one of my favorite fictitious heroes going up against one of the greatest villains of all time in Skeletor. And I'll tell you what, though, as much as this film has been maligned and trashed over the years, and honestly, I will say this, going to see it in the theater, let me backtrack, going to see it in the theater, I already knew there was something wrong because It's like, okay, here's Eternia. I don't recognize anyone besides Man-at-Arms, He-Man, and Skeletor, and Tila. Where is everybody? Where's the supporting cast? So they just threw people in there, threw people together, really. Um, most of the mercenaries, with the exception of Beastman, you had Evil Lynn, but you didn't see anyone else, either on the villainous or the heroic side. Nobody I could read, no Stratos, no Mossman, no, nobody. I mean, nobody. So I already knew there was someone who was a little wry, even as a child. I was like, this is sort of strange. And then they make their way to Earth. And as anyone knows, especially back then, if you're trying to save on a budget and you're trying to be more engaging, especially in the 80s, I guess, 70s, 80s, 90s, 80s and 90s, you had to throw some Earthlings in there. You had to humanize, you had to make it relatable. Now they know better. So whether it be budgetary constraints because it's canon, or again, it was an artistic thing to where they wanted to make it more relatable to the audience. Who knows? So they brought it to Earth. Open up a portal. They go to Earth. There's the cosmic key, I think, and a little dwarf alien. I forgot his name now. Billy Barty played him. So the point is, I'm watching this and I'm really enjoying it, though, despite everything. He-Man's, Dolph Lundgren makes a great He-Man. He could work on his English a little bit better, but physically, his physical presence is just amazing. The guy's just, he's the Adonis, man. But the real draw here, even years later, and I still, to this day, it's one of my favorite canon films. One of my favorite films. I look back and I grew up on this. I think I wore the VHS out 3 times over. I had to buy multiple copies, probably. Frank Langella really, really needs more recognition for his role as Skeletor. The guy, honestly, he goes down. I'm cautious about this. I'm not going to compare him to one of the great sci-fi villains of all time, but he comes close. Now you gotta give me that. He comes fairly close to Darth Vader. Maybe not in cultural saturation in the subculture, the mind of people and whatnot. But he comes. He hams it up royally. He gives. Apparently, everyone was, and everyone did their part. Some people were probably trying to get a paycheck. Others were, doing the best they could, like Dolph. But Langella sells it. This guy just takes it and puts it in 12th gear. You gotta watch it. You do. For nostalgia purposes, if you're a fan if you're a kid of the 80s and you grew up on stuff like this and Transformers, G.I. Joe, Thundercats, He-Man was always in there. And I reminded my friend of mine, best friend from childhood in Chicago, Dustin, I reminded him of this, and he had forgotten. I said, when we were kids, my parents took us to, I think it was the Sears Tower. Right now it's called the Willis Tower in Chicago. But there was an expo, like a display, I don't know what you'd call it. I call it an expo, on Masters of the Universe. And it was in 87 or 88, and it was, at that time, I was traveling around the U.S., probably to push enthusiasm and generate buzz for the movie. And it was all kinds of miniatures, the spaceships in the film, or the ship that comes to Earth carrying Skeletor and his minions, some of the weaponry, the armor from the film. And I have a lot of, deep in the far back of the recess of mine, I remember that, and I remember it fondly. I was like, not all the films they could have done, they had this. And I wonder if there's anyone out there who still might remember that if it came to your city, maybe not even in Chicago. But it was a great deal. But moving on, this was in 87. He does Red Scorpion in 88. Now, again, this has to do with the USSR and whatnot. I believe he is a soldier. Now, again, it's one of those I haven't seen in many, many years, but I believe he's a soldier in the USSR. And he goes rogue, I think. I don't think I've seen this since I was probably 11 or 12 years old. I was 30 years ago. So when I look back at it now and I'm saying, well, I'm trying to remember who else was in that. I know M. Emmett Walsh was in it, and Brian James had a small role as like an interrogator. Uh, and it's one of those where you see him, he doesn't even get killed. He's a bad guy, but Lundgren doesn't kill him. He just sort of disappears in the movie. But it's one worth revisiting. I want to revisit it. So let's move on from that. That was Red Scorpion in 88. Now, Punisher in 1989. The original. Still the best. I know you guys are going to argue with me all day and night about it. But I tell you what, Punisher did it, first. And it now granted, it wasn't necessarily as true to the source material as it could have been or should have been. But again, this is the 80s. People weren't paying attention to Microchip and Jigsaw and stuff. Oh, it's the Punisher. I don't think he even dons the skull costume till I don't think he does at all, to be honest with you. But it's a heck of a film. I own it because Dolph Lundgren. No, he does a great job in it. Louis Gossett Jr. does great supporting in it. And again, it's one of those I watched so many times as a kid. I pretended I was, the Punisher. I pretended I was Dolph Lundgren. Dude, how cool is this, man? He rides a motorcycle in the sewers. Now you tell me how much cooler can get than that. Exactly. So that was Punisher in 89. And now it comes to probably, I don't want to say it's my favorite, but probably one of my most favorite films he's ever done. And if I've said, a few minutes ago that I watched Master Universe, I watched The Punisher several hundreds of times as a kid. I Come in Peace, a.k.a. Dark Angel. It was released over in the European market as Dark Angel, but here in the U.S. there was already a Dark Angel, so they had to change the name to I Come in Peace. It was shot in Houston. Dolph Lundgren and Brian Benben of Dream On fame from HBO. Dude, it is one of the, bar none, greatest sci-fi masterpieces of all time. You have got to see this movie if you haven't already. Another one of those, man. I watched it over and over and over again as a kid, man. I loved it. Basically, what you're dealing with is Lundgren's a cop, along with Brian Benben. Well, Brian Benben's FBI, technically. And there's a murder, on that side of town where they're at, but it's sort of suspicious. Come to find out through the course of the film, Matthias Hughes is like a 7.5 foot tall, drug dealing intergalactic alien that comes to Earth, or has come to Earth, and he's looking to extract certain endorphins out of our body, I believe, and create like in a intergalactic heroin. So basically, he's come to Earth to harvest certain DNA, certain valuable, resources, at least in our bodies. And there's another alien in it, and he's he basically plays like a police officer, intergalactic police officer to Matthias Hughes, convict or drug dealer. Jay Bilas, I think was his name. I hadn't seen him do much work after that, and I don't think I ever saw him before, so we may not have to worry about that. During the course of the film, like I said, you got the Calico gun, which blows up like 3 cars at a time. Matthias Hughes is jumping from car to car. Lundgren, as tall as he is, he's getting his butt whipped by the alien. And it's all around great. I'm telling you. You had a bunch of other character actors in it. 2 of my favorites play these two. I don't think they're brothers, maybe not cousins, they're partners and they work for a what I would call like a white collar gang, called the White Boys, and they cause a lot of trouble for Lundgren and Brian Benben, aside from the alien. And Al Young pops up there in a very brief part. He tells them to tell the White Boys they can kiss my ass. Runs off, gets killed immediately, and Lundgren finds his body. But end of the film, lots of good one-liners near at the end of the movie. I could go into it. I don't want to spoil it for you. I know it's been around for 35 years, but still, it's one of my favorites, and I'm still waiting for the I Come in Peace action figures to this day. Anyway, moving on. So that was I Come in Peace in 1990. He did another one with Louis Gossett Jr. in 91. Reteamed with him as he teamed up in The Punisher with him. He did one in 91 called Cover Up. Haven't seen it. That's one I want to check out. It's on my list. Showdown Little Tokyo. It was 91. Okay, Showdown Little Tokyo. He takes on the Yakuza with Brandon Lee. He's, I think it takes place in California. I don't quite remember. He's a cop. Brandon Lee is a cop too, but he hasn't fully embraced his ethnic cultural background. And Dolph Lundgren's, I think in the film, if he's more of a expert in martial arts than Brandon Lee is. Brandon Lee, a lot could be said about him, and probably need to do a whole video on him. And him and Lundgren do a great job in this. I think they've got great chemistry, and they take on the always dependable Kerry Haruyuki Tagawa in this. Always plays a great bad guy. People might remember him from Mortal Kombat as the villain in that, where he says, it has begun. But anyway, so that was Showdown Little Tokyo in 91. Does Universal Soldier in 92. Again, another one that I just grew up on. I was just fascinated with as a kid. Me and my buddy, when I was a kid, my friend Dustin, he was, he always wanted to be like, compared to like, he was always idolizing Jean-Claude Van Damme. And I was always more intrigued by Dolph Lundgren. And so the first pairing of these two was just absolutely legendary, just absolutely classic. Dolph Lundgren plays the villain, the antagonist, whereas Jean-Claude Van Damme plays the protagonist. He's the good guy. They're both super soldiers, but one goes right, one goes left, and they come clashing, together during the course of the film. And at the end, great fight scene at the end, great ending fight scene. And who can forget Dolph Lundgren when he says, "I'm all ears, soldier." So that was Universal Soldier 92. In 94, he did Men of War, another big action blockbuster. You had all kinds of people in that. Anthony Dennison, you had Tiny Lister Jr., Kevin Dye, who showed up in Lost, the series later on, years later. I think he was in the first or second 48 Hours also. Just a great, great, great cast of like action stars, and came together great. And just really a guy's action film. You probably, and ladies, if you like those kind of shoot 'em ups too, so I'd say go ahead and check it out. I don't own it myself. I'm trying to get a copy of it. But yeah, Men of War, man, Men of War. In 95, he does Johnny Mnemonic. Johnny Mnemonic, 1995. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one. Johnny Mnemonic. Let me tell you something about this movie. It sucked really bad, okay? I went with some friends to see it in 95. It was supposed to be, at that time, the internet was sort of like in its infancy, right? And big tech was really just coming on the scene at that point, right? And so a movie about a guy who acts as a information courier with, gigabytes and megabytes of black market information downloaded into his brain, like a positronic brain, and then he just, takes it to a certain other black market individual. They download it and use that information, for whatever purposes, nefarious purposes, right? So that's like a big deal. I mean, no one's done that before. This is before the Matrix and all that. And so I guess you could say that Keanu Reeves was almost like a proto Neo. And so all that sounds like really great, right? Wrong. You would think so. But I'm telling you, I saw it in the theater once. I think I watched it. I tried watching it again after that. It's terrible. I mean, you had a few other actors in it who did their best. I can't even really remember who the heavy was in it, to be honest with you. But it was around that time. I think it was the same year, if not maybe the year before, that Tank Girl came out. And you talk about two films that were, I walked in, I was like 14, 15, 16 years old. And I thought, man, this is going to be great. I knew it wasn't going to be Batman 89 or anything like Terminator 2. But I had high hopes. Man, it was just so disappointing. It was terrible. It's far and above different than some of the, crap films of the 80s that I talk about sometimes, right? A lot of the canon films and so on and so forth. It's I don't know that it's a cut above that, but if you're ever in the mood for a film that, you think to yourself, wow, this is Neo, this Keanu Reeves is going to be great. Sit down and just, you want to laugh your socks off. You want to poke fun at that with some friends at night, eating some pizza. Watch Johnny Mnemonic. Dolph Lundgren, like I said, he's in it for a little bit. He plays an assassin, and his character, I just can't get into it. I won't. So that's Johnny Mnemonic in '95. After that, Lundgren did, here again, he segues back into what today we call video on demand. Back then it was direct-to-video, Blackjack in '98. And I'm mentioning this one because out of a lot, and to be honest with you, I have to be completely transparent. I haven't seen all of his direct-to-video work, all of his efforts. I've seen a smattering here and there. There's probably a few more I want to check out. But, as big a fan as I am, there's some things I know that are just going to be just complete trash, no matter what. And I'm sure that Dolph would even be honest enough to say that. I'm sure he has. But Blackjack sort of stands out. It was pretty interesting. Guy who, there's something to do. I think he's got a phobia of sorcery, develops a phobia of the color white, of all things. And I don't know if he goes through therapy. This is Dolph Lundgren, the protagonist. And the villain in the film, whoever the villain was, I don't remember, but he uses it to his advantage and whatnot. So it's a pretty good little direct-to-video flick, I think I own it somewhere. But anyway, so that was Blackjack in '98. The next edition of the Universal Soldier series, which was Regeneration in 2009. The second part was in the mid-90s, and I'm not mentioning that one because I hated that one. That was, and he wasn't even a part of that, if I remember right. Van Damme and Bill Goldberg and I think Michael Jai White. I can't remember about that. That was just absolutely terrible. But this one's great. I'm telling you, it's he's got, Van Damme comes back as the same character, Luke Devereaux, if I'm not mistaken, and he's struggling to remember because it's been like 15 years since the second one, right? And they reanimate the same guy, the same Luke Devereaux. He wakes up, and a lot of trauma. Well, a lot of this takes place in like a warehouse, whatnot, in, of all places, I think it's in the Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken, or close to Russia. But during the course of the film, they send Devereaux in because they've got these new types of soul soldiers, universal soldiers, a new class of them. And they send him into this operation because there's a rogue, enemy faction or cell, as there usually is. And they've got their own soul soldiers, universal soldiers. So they send in a team, try to take him down. As usual, the plan falls through, it doesn't work. So they have to send him in, Van Damme, Luke Devereaux. Well, one of the surprise, I would say, sort of surprised the bad guys too, because he turns on him, is Dolph Lundgren's original antagonist from the 92 original Universal Soldier. They reanimate him, the bad guys do. Well, in short order, he turns on them, and then he turns the soldiers, the bad soldiers, against Luke Devereaux, and it turns out to be what I consider a really well-made production value, script-wise, definitely action-wise, great sequel in the franchise. I think it was worthy of inclusion here, and I definitely think out of the 4 Universal Soldiers, I'm not including the TV ones, forget all that, but out of the 4 that were made in a universe and a continuity and whatnot, I think the 2 that stand out were the first and the third. Second one's complete trash. It should be burned. The fourth one is bizarre. It's like a fever dream. It's really odd. Maybe I can get into that some point later. But yeah, so that one was in 2009. And this begins the resurgence of Dolph's career in mainstream cinema. He begins to rise a little bit, okay? The reason I'm saying this is because his next film is actually Expendables in 2010. My co-host Jack and I did a video on this, on the Expendables films, talked a little bit about it. I know that, Stallone, one of his first choices was to get Dolph in there because, starring together back in Rocky IV, him as Ivan Drago, Rocky Balboa and all that, and their friendship together. So I know that was a big part of it. So he was never like second, third, fourth on the list or nothing like that. So he comes back, this is, of course, it's an ensemble piece. You got all kinds of action stars and whatnot, and UFC, NFL stars. For some reason, it's inexplicable to me why you would include those UFC stars in a movie about 80s action stars, but, I'm not the one who made it. But Dolph Lundgren does a great job as Gunnar Jensen is in this. First one's sort of strange because he appears to be a good guy in the beginning of the film. I'm sure most people have seen it. And then during the course of the movie, he gets involved, in drugs and whatnot, and so he's trading information. He basically turns on his buddies, Randy Couture and Stallone and the rest of them. He turns up Jet Li, and he sells them out to the bad guys, Eric Roberts and Stone Cold and Gary Daniels. And so there's a pretty cool fight scene in it, and you think that he's going to get killed, right? Because I think it's Stallone or Jet Li confront him. By the end of the film, he comes back, and everything's forgiven and forgotten, inexplicably again. And they're ready for the next installment of the franchise. So that was 2010. And here's another exception to the rule. In 2012, 2 years later, he does a really good one, another VOD direct-to-video with Cuba Gooding Jr., One in the Chamber. Loved it, own it. Great production values, great great action. Script was pretty decent. He plays, if I remember right, Cuba Gooding Jr. plays a mercenary of some sort. He's a good guy. And I think there's, like, as usual in movies like this, there's a bit of confusion in the storyline, and he goes up against Dolph Lundgren and thinks he's the bad guy. They fight it out. Great fight sequence. I'm telling you, great fight sequence. They both did their own work in that, their own stunts, and it's just really unbelievable. I really like this film, and I really recommend it. I know my co-host Jack. I don't know what Daniel thinks about this. I don't know if I've told him about it or if he's seen it, but I really recommend it. It's a great action film. If you're looking for straightforward, okay, no, it's not a Jason Bourne movie. I'm not even going to compare it to that level. But it's a great Dolph Lundgren, Cuba Gooding Jr. action film. Mercenary, shoot 'em up. Really recommend it. So that was in 2012. Same year, because the Expendables franchise, I know we're getting another installment, or supposed to, this year, next year, but at that time it was 2010, 12, and then 14. So in 2012, the second one comes out, reprises his role as Gunnar Jensen. This time, they go up against, of all people, they go up against Van Damme. Jean Villain, villain. That's hilarious, isn't it? And Scott Adkins is his right-hand guy. So he reprises his role. Another great installment in the Expendables franchise. We're not going to talk anymore about that right now. Might come back to it later. So that was 2012. Also in 2012 is the aforementioned, the fourth, and so far up until now, final Universal Soldier movie, in which in fact Scott Adkins plays the protagonist. I mentioned before that it's a really weird one. I mean, it's very strange. In fact, Jean-Claude Van Damme shows back up as Luke Devereaux, only he's a bad guy this time with some weird face paint, war paint. It's just an odd movie. It's worth a watch. So in 2018, he does, and I mentioned this one. I watched it with my co-host Jack some years ago. It's called The Package, and Dolph Lundgren. It's another direct-to-video, but it's Dolph Lundgren as the bad guy, as the heavy, and Stone Cold Steve Austin as the good guy. Right? In this one, he goes up against Lundgren, and again, it's a nice little, diversion in Lundgren's career, because in this, one of the few times since like the 80s, he plays the bad guy. He plays the heavy. Because after Ivan Drago, most of the time he was playing the good guy, except for maybe Universal Soldier. Okay, so anyway, so he does that in again, that was 2012. So we had a busy year at that point. And after that, he does Expendables 3 in 24. I'm sorry. Yeah, Expendables 3 in 2014. It's the weakest of the franchise, honestly. We know why. It was, they went for a more all-encompassing, audience-encompassing PG-13 rating instead of R. We know the story. Mel Gibson is a capable bad guy. It's no problem. But you had like 30 good guys, and things just get lost in the shuffle. I mean, everybody just can't get the screen time that they're due. Again, I could spend a whole video on the Expendables, what I think they should have done or could have done, or they probably won't even do and correct in this next one. But, that's a moot point. So that was in 2014. Also in 2014, I keep saying it's few and far between, but in the last 10 to 15 years, some of the direct-to-video and video-on-demand work Lundgren's done is really exceptional. And this is another one, Skin Trait. Tackles a very prevalent, very hot button, topic right now is human trafficking, and in it, just like in Taken with Liam Neeson, Dolph Lundgren's character, his daughter gets kidnapped into the human trafficking trade. And he goes out sort of Liam Neeson-like and, goes to get her back. And the reason I mention this is because it's a great action film. He teams up with, and I forgot his co-star in this, Forgive me for that. I don't quite remember. It could have been the same guy from The Raid, but I don't know. But I do know some of the other ones. You got Michael J. White, you got Ron Perlman, you got Peter Weller, and dude, they all do just a phenomenal job. It's a great action film. Again, just like One in the Chamber, Universal Soldier Regeneration. Uh, the last so many that he's done, with some exceptions in between, have been some really great work outside of mainstream theater in Hollywood. So that was Skin Trade in 2014. Uh, After that, he does a few other things, and then eventually he comes back with he does Aquaman. He plays King Nereus. I think Aquaman was what, about 3-4 years ago. He's got a supporting role in that, which is great. Gives Lundgren, a lot more, screen time in a big budget film. Brings him back into the public consciousness. And so, I would say his screen career, his resurgence, started probably around 2010 with The Expendables, and then has continued to carry on till now, because he did Aquaman, as King Nereus, and he's going to reprise that role in the sequel, which comes out this year next. And then, this is all leading up to Creed 2. We go into Creed. We could talk about that, but the reason I'm bringing up Creed 2 is because of Lundgren's appearances. We all know in Creed 2, the son of Apollo Creed, is Rocky Balboa is training him. We take a look in Russia at the beginning of the film, and Ivan Drago has got his eye on Balboa's protege, and he's like, okay, well, now Ivan Drago's son is ready. He's been training for the last 20 years, right? And he's eager to have revenge. So the movie is about how he takes his son, goes over back to the U.S. and pits him up against Creed's son. And I love Michael B. Jordan in this. I thought it was great. I thought Creed 1 was amazing. Love Creed 2, and I'm looking forward to Creed 3. And the disappointing thing is, a lot of things that I think my co-host Jack would probably, and Daniel would probably agree with me here, is that they did edit out a scene, I think at an airport or in an airport, where Rocky and Drago confront each other, and I think a shot is taken on from both sides. I think somebody swings, I forgot who connects and whatnot, if either do. But they cut that out, and I'm like, man, that's something I know a lot of us were looking forward to for the past 25, 35 years. I know I was. However, I'm very appreciative of the scene they kept in the film where Drago goes into the little Italian restaurant that Rocky owns, and he sits down, or he's sitting at the table, and Rocky comes in, and the waitress says somebody's waiting for you. He goes, "Is that you?" Dude. I mean, 35 years in the making. It's a wonderful scene. Wish it could have been longer. A lot of us probably feel that way. But by the end of the film, Creed comes out on top. Him and Rocky, Rocky, from what you can tell, he sort of takes a step back, rightfully so, because Creed's son is now fully come into his own, and Rocky sort of, so to speak, rides off into the sunset, goes to visit his son and grandchild and whatnot. And but there's sort of redemption too on the other side of things, because yes, they lose, but Drago and his son go back to Russia and realize that there's I think it creates a deeper bond, because at first he's sort of using his son just to get to Rocky, and then by the end of the film, they develop a deeper bond. It's more about family, father and son, on both ends. So it's A great film. Great. I need to revisit. I only saw it once in the theater. I was looking forward to something that said that I could have sworn they said that they were going to do some kind of extension of that or television series just about Ivan Drago. And I'm like, oh man, this is wonderful. But you know, as usual in Hollywood, you know, there's a lot of big ideas and big thoughts, and it never doesn't always come together. Um, there's one that's coming out soon. I think it's called Castle Falls. If it hasn't already, that's one I want to check out. That again, that's VOD. Uh, you know, Aquaman 2 coming out. He's going to reprise his role, and then obviously Expendables 4. So hopefully on the horizon, you know, we get a lot more Lundgren. As everyone knows, like I said, I'm such a big fan of this guy, and I'm looking forward to seeing what work he can bring us, and you know, in the near future, and hopefully in the decades to come. And thank you. I know it's a little long-winded, but I'm trying to find my feet on these videos. You know,